Welcome back to part 2 of my video showing how to upload data onto the Open Data Portal. Unfortunately, the last video ended rather suddenly with Microsoft's 15-minute curfew. So I'm going to continue showing you how to process this data set now that we've uploaded it onto the portal. And the main way we do that is through this processing tab. So here we can configure various aspects of the fields and make the changes that we need to do. So one of the first things I want to do is to add a processor which is going to create a GeoPoint. So that is this processor here. And it's quite simple to set up because all it's asking for is individual fields, one for the latitude and one for longitude. And we have that in the data set. So we can just select our latitude and our longitude field, and it's already given us this code which will give us a projected coordination onto the globe so that the points are rendered in the correct places. And we're just going to create that GeoPoint field, and we're going to call it GeoPoint 2D. It's a two-dimensional GeoPoint. If we click out of that, it's created that processor and it's now generated that field and added it onto the end. So as you can see, it's simply those 2 points represented in one specific field separated by comma. Now the other things that we wanted to add, if you remember, we took out 2 fields in the original data set, which was all HGVs and all motor vehicles, because that saves us some space when we create this or when we upload the raw data set. But we need to recreate those fields now because those 2 summaries or total fields might be quite useful to people without having to calculate it themselves. So we'll calculate those fields for them. So we'll add a processor and we'll add a expression processor. Now this enables us to do any mathematical or string or date-related expression and generate new data. So this is the help pages for the expression processor, and you can see it's fairly comprehensive. It gives you lots of examples on how to create expressions that will generate data from our existing data. So let's go back to the expression processor, and this is the string that I copied from the previous session. So you can see what we're doing here is we're just adding up all of the HGV fields because it's broken down into different categories of HGV. You know, how many axles have they got? Is it rigid? Is it articulated? But all we're trying to do here is get a total of all HGVs. So we've added all of them up and we create a new field called all HGVs. And it will now run that expression. And we'll just check to make sure it's done something sensible. And yeah, it looks like it's come up with sensible numbers for all HGVs. So that's good. Now we're just going to add in one more processor, which is going to be another expression, which is going to create a new field for all motor vehicles. So we've already got all HGVs. And we're going to add all the other motor vehicle categories that are not captured by the HGV category. So we have got 2-wheeled motor vehicles, it's important the names precisely right. We've got buses and coaches, and then we've got LGVs, light goods vehicles. I think that is it, and we're going to call that all motor vehicles. Let that run. Check that we've got data. Yes, that looks sensible. It should be, in all cases, larger than all HGVs. So that's good. Let's just save that. So we've created new data using the processors. One's a geopoint, one's expression, and let's just label that so clear what they do. So now we have an updated data set, and we're going to now set up some of the filters and do a bit of cleaning and just do some general tidying. So one of the important concepts in the portal is that of filters. So this is generally categorical data that we can use to filter or subset a much larger data set into just the features that we want to look at. So, for example, we might want to only or allow the user just to filter on road name. So if we just want to look at major corridors, for example, or unclassified roads, that might be a useful thing to set. So we simply set this filter or facet, the terms are used interchangeably, on this field. Then that's what we need to do to set up the filters, and I'll show you how that looks in a minute. But we might also want to use road type as a filter. And we've got a date field in here, and that's quite useful because you might only be interested in the most recent, say, 2 or 3 years of data. So we can use that as a filter that will enable us to select only the most recent or the oldest or any specified range of dates. So what we can also do in this screen, or the processing screen, is to make these field names a lot more friendly and legible to people. So we, instead of count underscore point underscore ID, we might just want to call that count ID. And we might want a description here, which is unique reference count location. And because the data types are underneath here, this is a data type of integer. Now, it doesn't really need to be integer because that implies that it's a numeric quantity that we can in some way analyze. And in this case, it's not. It's just an arbitrary label. So we're probably better off calling that a text field. So we can go through and check all of these data types, give them sensible names. I'm not going to do all of that here because it's quite dull, but you get the idea. This would be fairly straightforward to do, and you should do this because this makes the data much more legible and accessible to people, to the end users. But I've done the main thing. So I've set up filters, I've looked at data types, and what I'm going to do now is actually just take out the latitude and longitude fields, because we've already captured that in the geopoint field. So I'm going to remove them, but I'm going to remove them in another screen. And I'm going to set some of the units in this data. So we've got length kilometers. So I'm just going to call that length and set units in this configure button. So I've got a configure button here, and units, it's going to enable me to set it to a whole range of different units are available, and I'm going to just find, probably gone past it. There it is, kilometers. And I can do the same here with miles. Okay, so I'm just checking all of my other numeric continuous quantities here, and they're all set to be integers or whole numbers, so I don't need to do anything with that. I need to change this to integer because otherwise it won't display properly and we can't analyze it, and this to integer. So there we go. That's quite a lot of processing we've just done on that quick sweep. We'll save that. And we'll publish it. It's going to take a little while. If you imagine that we had the original 26,000 lines, this would take a lot longer, but there it is, it's done. So we can go back to the front end view. And if you look, this is what we started off with. If we just refresh that by pressing F5, then we'll get that revised data, and you can see that now we've got these two nicely named fields here, and we've also got some filters here that appear. And I'll talk a bit more about them in a minute, but I just wanted to also point out the map that now appears. Because we've now created a GeoPoint, the map functionality appears. And this is showing us all of the count points within those nearly 3,000 lines of data, so that we can actually get a nice map, and we can also do things like filter on the map. If we just want to look at Redcliffe, for example, we can do that, which I showed in a previous video. So that's the geographic filter, and similarly we can use the filters that we've now set up, so that maybe we just want to look at data from 2020, and maybe we just want to look at the unclassified roads in 2020. So this is the whole purpose of setting up filters, and it makes the data a lot more useful and a lot easier for users to manipulate and interpret and download just the data that they want. Okay, so that's the first round of processing. I'm just going to go back and do a couple more things, because as you may notice, I've still got some fields in here, latitude and longitude, that aren't really much use now that we've got the GeoPoint data in. So let's have a look and see what we can do about that. So back to the back office, we've got this visualizations tab here, and here we can look at the way the tables, maps or charts are displayed by default. So in this situation, we want to make invisible the latitude and longitude fields, because we've already got them. So we'll get rid of those. And we might also want to move some things around. So at the moment we've got GeoPoint is in the middle of our vehicle counts, which is not a logical place for it to be. And we might actually want that at the end of the table so that it doesn't distract, because most people are only interested in the GeoPoint data when it's shown on a map. We might also want to, let's say, have the count date as the first column, and then the hour, and then the count ID, then the direction, and the road name, and the road type. So this looks like it's in a reasonably sensible order now. So we've made those little changes that just really, it hasn't changed the data, it's just changed the way the data is displayed. So that's all good. We can save that. And what we mustn't forget to do is fill in the metadata. This was one of our principles at the beginning of the first video. So what we need to do in here is create a brief description of the data. And just be something simple like that. And what we've got here is manual classified counts. Counts are 12 hours. And we would put in any relevant information in there that helps people understand what the data is and